She fell in love with a married man, and she was the one person on earth who had no excuse not to see it coming. Because Miranda Lambert didn't grow up in a normal house. She grew up in a house where her own parents caught people like him for a living. I said this months ago, and I'll say it again right now. The most honest songwriter in country music spent her entire childhood watching her mother and father expose cheating husbands, cheating wives, secret second lives for cash on a case file at the kitchen table. And then, she became the woman at the center of the most publicly dissected divorce in modern country music. Keep that contradiction in your head. We're coming back to it. Here's the question worth sitting with before we go any further. What do you become when the people who raised you spent every single day proving that nobody's story is the full story? Lindale, Texas. Population: small enough that everyone already knows your business before you've finished telling it. Except Rick and Bev Lambert didn't deal in gossip. They dealt in proof. A private investigation agency run out of a small East Texas town built entirely on one ugly, unglamorous specialty: catching people in the act of lying to the person who loved them most. Affairs, hidden second phones. Spouses who already knew deep down and just needed someone to hand them the photograph that made it real. That was the family business. Think about what that actually means day to day. Case file sitting in the house. The phone ringing at odd hours, not a friend calling, a client asking if there's been movement on a stakeout. Dinner conversation that isn't about homework. It's about who got caught and how and what the evidence finally looked like once somebody laid it out flat on the table. Most kids grow up assuming people are basically telling the truth. Miranda Lambert grew up with documented proof of exactly how often they aren't, and Miranda Lambert was the kid in the next room. She has said flatly across years of interviews that this wasn't some dark secret she discovered later. It was just Tuesday. It was dinner conversation. It was the air in the house. She watched her parents document betrayal for a living long before she ever wrote a single lyric about heartbreak. So when, years later, a married country star named Blake Shelton locked eyes with her across a stage during a televised duet, and something passed between them that neither one could call platonic, she knew exactly what she was looking at. Not had a feeling. Knew. I knew he was married, she has said. I had seen their wedding pictures in Country Weekly. I knew better. My parents are private investigators, for God's sake. I've seen this my whole life. Of all people to know better, I know better than this. Sit with that sentence for a second. Of all people. The daughter of the truth finders falling, in real time, into the exact kind of story her own parents got paid to expose. She fell anyway. That's the open loop. Hold it. Because the woman who knew better is about to live through the headline anyway, and what she does with that knowledge years later is the whole reason you're still watching this. Let's go back further. Before Shelton. Before the headlines. Before any of it. Miranda Lee Lambert, born November 10, 1983, Longview, Texas, raised in Lindale, in that house, with those parents, with that business running quietly in the background of every single day. Her father wasn't just an investigator. He'd been a guitarist first. A songwriter. So Miranda grew up at the exact intersection of two trades that sound completely unrelated, and aren't. Uncovering hidden truth for a living, writing honest songs for a living. Same instinct. Different paperwork. He played her Merle Haggard. Guy Clark. Songwriters who didn't flinch. Who told you the ugly thing plainly without dressing it up, because the truth doesn't need a costume to be worth hearing. That was the curriculum. Before school. Before fame. Before any of it. She started performing as a teenager. Competed on Nashville Star in 2003. Finished third. Here's the part people skip past. She'd already released her own self-produced debut independently 2 years before that show ever existed for her. Nobody discovered Miranda Lambert. She discovered herself first, on her own terms, and let the television show catch up later. Think about what that actually required at that age. No label backing, no machine behind her. Just a teenager from a town most people couldn't find on a map, deciding she wasn't going to wait for someone else's permission to start. That's not a small detail. That's the entire pattern of her career, showing up before anyone was paying attention to notice it. Third place on a televised competition could have ended a lot of careers right there. For her, it barely registered as a setback, because she'd already proven to herself with her own money, her own independent release, that she didn't need the show to validate what she already knew about her own work. Have you ever grown up around people who simply could not lie to themselves about what was actually happening and had that rub off on you whether you wanted it to or not? That's the inheritance. It didn't arrive with a record deal. It arrived at the kitchen table in Lindale, Texas, years before anyone outside that town had heard her sing a single note. She signed with Epic, released Kerosene in 2005. And it landed like exactly what it was: rock-inflected, unapologetic, built on fire and revenge, and women who refused to sit quietly and take it. Critics noticed immediately. This wasn't a manufactured Nashville product. This was someone telling you precisely who she was on the first try, with no interest in softening it for radio. Compare that to what else was on country radio in 2005. Polished, safe, built for rotation, not for confrontation. Kerosene didn't ask permission. The title track is, literally, a song about burning a cheating man's belongings in the front yard, which, if you've been paying attention to where this woman came from, is not a coincidence. That's not metaphor for her. That's Tuesday at the Lambert house, set to a melody. She wasn't writing about secrets. She was writing about what happens after the secret gets found. Now here's where the story she was raised to recognize becomes the story she's living inside of. 2006. Blake Shelton. Married at the time to someone else. The duet happens a year earlier. You're the Reason God Made Oklahoma, CMT's 100 Greatest Duets concert. 2 voices, 1 microphone setup, the kind of harmony that either works on a technical level or works on a level neither of them planned for. This was the second kind. Cameras catch it. Audiences feel it before either artist says a word about it publicly. Something ignites. But Lambert, fully aware, more aware than almost anyone else on that stage could possibly be, of exactly what a married man's attention is worth, because she'd watched 2 professionals build a career out of pricing exactly that holds back. She waits. He files. The divorce finalizes reportedly after days of him agonizing over it. Only then does anything start. 2007, they go public. Red carpet, CMT Music Awards. And from there, it isn't just romance, it's collaboration. Shelton co-writes on her 2009 album, Revolution. They eventually record Boys Round Here together with her group, Pistol Annies. 2 careers, fully intertwined, in front of the entire country music industry. Revolution gives her The House That Built Me, the song that becomes her signature. A ballad about going back to find something you lost. The Academy of Country Music will later call it the Song of the Decade. Her first Grammy. Song, single, and video of the year at the ACMs, album of the year at both the ACMs and the CMAs. And here's a detail that tells you everything about how she operates. That song was written for Blake Shelton. Tom Douglas and Alan Shamblin wrote it with him in mind. She heard it, loved it so completely, and simply took it. Because if a song was telling the truth, that clearly she wasn't going to let it go to someone else just because of who it was written for. Around the same time, she's building something else entirely, Pistol Annies, alongside Ashley Monroe and Angelina Presley. 3 women, splitting the songwriting credit evenly, refusing to let any one of them dominate the group's identity. It's a strange move for someone who's already a rising solo star. Most artists at that point in a career are protecting the spotlight, not sharing it. But sharing the spotlight was never really the risk for her. The risk was always telling the truth in front of an audience that might not want to hear it. Pistol Annies gave her a room where 3 women could say the ugliest, funniest, most honest things about marriage, money, and men, and nobody outside that room got to edit it first. That instinct, protect the truth, not the image, runs through everything she touches. May 2010. Shelton proposes, calls her father first, the investigator, the man who'd spent a career confirming what people were actually capable of, to ask permission before he ever presented the ring. May 14, 2011, Don Strange Ranch, Boerne, Texas, married in front of every camera country music had to offer. The Golden Couple. That's the headline the entire industry ran with for years. It was even true for a while. Here's the gear shift. Because what comes next isn't the fairy tale anymore. 2011, same year as the wedding, Shelton joins The Voice as a coach. And almost overnight, the kind of fame neither of them had fully lived through before lands directly on top of a brand new marriage. "It was a shock to my system," she has said. "I'm a Scorpio, so I'm already very private and protective. Think about that collision for a second. A woman raised by two people whose entire profession was uncovering other people's private business now has her own private business splashed across every checkout line magazine cover in the country. The instinct that watched her parents document secrets without ever broadcasting their own slams directly into a level of exposure that makes privacy almost physically impossible. Magazine after magazine, speculation after speculation. Claims she'd later call simply untrue for years. Rumors the whole way through, both of them denying it publicly right up until they couldn't anymore. July 20th, 2015, the joint statement, "This is not the future we envisioned, and it is with heavy hearts that we move forward separately. We are real people, with real lives, with real families, friends and colleagues." And here's the part that should stop you cold if you've been paying attention from the beginning of this video. The woman who said, "I know better than this," the daughter of two professional truth finders, was now the one living inside a headline that millions of strangers were trying to investigate for themselves. Think about the strange role reversal happening here. Her entire childhood, the Lamberts were the ones knocking on doors, pulling records, finding the proof nobody wanted found. Now it was her face on the cover, her marriage being picked apart by people with zero documentation and an unlimited appetite for speculation. Tabloids ran theories. Anonymous sources claimed things neither party ever confirmed. The exact kind of unverified, undocumented guesswork her own parents would never have dared file as a finished case. She watched professionals do this work with rigor and discretion her entire life, and then she watched amateurs do the opposite version of it, loudly, in print, with her name on it. She has described the divorce years later with a directness she almost never uses about it, horrible like the death of something. And then she did the one thing nobody expected from someone raised the way she was raised. She didn't explain herself. No interviews breaking it down. No statement clarifying who did what. No detailed account handed to the same tabloids that had been inventing her life story for years. Instead, early 2016, a small studio in East Nashville, 32 years old, divorced less than a year. Sitting with songwriter Natalie Hemby and producer Jay Joyce, building what would become a double album. The weight of these wings, here's the open loop, paid off. Remember of all people to know better. The daughter of truth finders who knew exactly what she was risking and walked into it anyway. Here's what she does with that knowledge. Once it costs her everything, she doesn't hand the truth to the public. She doesn't hand it to the tabloids. She puts it somewhere only the people willing to actually sit and listen will ever find it. "If you want to hear my side of the story," she said, "it's all on there," very honestly. A double album, not a press conference, not a carefully lawyered statement. The complete, unguarded truth encoded into 32 songs instead of one tidy quote. It won Album of the Year at the Academy of Country Music Awards. That's the irony sitting underneath this entire story. A woman raised by two professional secret finders grew into an artist who point-blank refused to hand her own secret directly to anyone. She made the world come find it. The same way her parents always made the truth something you had to dig for, document, and earn, never something you got handed for free. Have you ever lived through something painful enough that the only honest version of it you were willing to give anyone was the one you built yourself, on your own terms, in your own time? That refusal, that's the most quietly defiant thing Miranda Lambert has ever done. If any part of this is landing for you, hit like right now. It costs you nothing, and it's the only way this reaches somebody else who needs to hear it today. What came after the divorce wasn't a retreat. It was an acceleration. The Weight of These Wings, Album of the Year. Then Platinum. Then Wildcard. Both winning Grammys for Best Country Album, all while she kept running Pistol Annie's alongside Ashley Monroe and Angelina Presley, a whole separate creative lane away from the solo spotlight, including a Christmas record and new hits well into the following decade. She holds more Academy of Country Music Awards than anyone in that organization's history. 7 CMA wins for Female Vocalist of the Year, 6 of them back-to-back, landing right in the years immediately surrounding the divorce and its fallout. The exact stretch where the tabloids assumed she'd be wrecked was the exact stretch where she was breaking records. Let that sit for a second. The narrative outside her house was collapse. The reality inside the work was the single most dominant run of her entire career. 2 completely different stories happening in the same timeline, and only one of them was true. 2021, she opens her own bar on Nashville's Lower Broadway. First female artist to do it on that strip. A literal claim on real estate that, until that point, belonged almost entirely to men with their names already on the building. And tell me what you'd take from her story so far in the comments. I want to know which part of this actually stuck with you. And then, January 2019, she marries New York City police officer Brendan McLaughlin. They'd met 2 months earlier on the set of Good Morning America. "My husband's a big-time extrovert," she said, "which is good for me, because I got so defensive from the PTSD of being on magazine covers for things that weren't true." PTSD, that's her word, not mine. From magazine covers. From years of being investigated by strangers who'd never sat in her kitchen, never watched her parents work a case, never understood that she'd seen this exact playbook her entire life just from the other side of the table. Notice the difference between the 2 marriages, because it's not subtle. The Shelton years were lived inside a spotlight. Neither of them fully controlled every appearance dissected, every silence treated as evidence of something. The McLaughlin years are lived almost entirely outside that spotlight, by design. A police officer, not a fellow celebrity. A relationship built quietly, away from matching tour schedules and joint red carpets, in the kind of privacy she'd been trying to protect since she was a teenager in Lindale, watching her parents guard their own clients' secrets. She didn't just marry someone different. She built an entirely different kind of marriage, one where the investigation simply has nothing to find, because there's nothing being performed for an audience in the first place. Subscribe right now if stories like this, people who actually live what they were raised to understand, are the ones you want more of. It helps more than you'd think. In 2026, she's still recording, still touring, more than 2 decades since Kerosene first told everyone exactly who she was. She's still married to McLaughlin, and she talks about that relationship now with a settled, grateful ease that is nothing like the careful, guarded silence she kept through the Shelton years. She's even reached the point where she can laugh at it. She's talked about a tabloid claiming she was pregnant because she ate a cheeseburger in public. That's the level of scrutiny she lived under for years. And now, she mostly just shrugs. She still runs her Mutt Nation Foundation, still shows up as one of the most respected voices in a genre that, by her own account, and plenty of others, has never quite given its most accomplished women the radio time they earned. It's worth noting how rarely that combination happens. Most artists who survive a public scandal either fade into safer, quieter material, or lean so hard into the drama that it becomes their whole brand. She did neither. She kept writing the same way she always had, plainly, honestly, without flinching, and let the work itself outlast every headline that tried to define her by the worst year of her life. And underneath all of it, the same lesson. Every time. She learned it as a teenager, in Lindale, Texas, watching 2 people build a career out of proving that the truth always surfaces eventually, whether anyone wants it to or not. She just decided, somewhere along the way, that she'd rather be the one who decides when. Think about how rare that actually is. Most people who live through public heartbreak end up either oversharing every detail for sympathy or going completely silent out of shame. Miranda Lambert did neither. She built a third option, total honesty, delivered entirely on her own terms, in a format the tabloids couldn't edit, couldn't quote out of context, couldn't twist into a headline. A double album doesn't fit in a 30-second segment. That was the point. That's not avoidance. That's control. The same control her parents exercised every time they sat across from a client and laid out documented proof instead of speculation. No theory, no guesswork. Just the complete record, presented once, presented honestly, and left for whoever was willing to actually sit with it. This was never really a story about a country music divorce. It's a story about what happens when you're raised to recognize exactly how a lie looks before it's caught, and you still have to live through one anyway. It's about refusing to hand your most painful chapter to people who only wanted the easy version of it, even when staying quiet meant absorbing years of stories that simply weren't true. So tell me, what's the one chapter in your own life you chose to tell honestly, in your own time, instead of letting everyone else's simplified version become the story people believed about you? Put it in the comments. I read every single one. Because this was never really about Blake Shelton or a wedding in Bern, Texas, or a joint statement released on a Monday in July. It was about a woman who was raised to know better, fell anyway, and then turned around and proved that knowing better and surviving anyway were never actually opposites. The most important interview Miranda Lambert ever gave about her divorce wasn't an interview at all. It was a double album, recorded quietly, telling the whole truth exactly once, the way she learned at her own kitchen table that the truth always deserves to be told, even when it takes a little longer to find the courage to tell it. We'll see you in the next one. Right here, same channel, same honesty.